I'm doing an interview today with Katherine J. She wrote this magnificent, truly magnificent book named Joan, of course, referring to Joan of Arc. And as Hilary Mantel says on the cover, it is as if the author has crept inside the statue and breathed a soul into it, recreating Joan of Arc as a woman of our time. What a beautiful compliment.
Oh, thank you so much.
How does it feel that you're one of the last that will have a blurb of Hilary Mantel on their cover?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was one of the last, but I know probably better than anyone aside from my editor what that blurb did for me.
Yeah.
And the thing with um I guess publishing or with writing, the book is always the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, but for me that blurb, it was the difference between playing an instrument, let's say like it's a trumpet or something, in an alley where no one will pay much attention to you or even
Mm-hmm.
stop to listen to you, and then finding yourself playing the same trumpet on a stage with people who are at least willing to give you a chance
Mm-hmm.
and to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what the blurb did for me. And do you remember that scene in the book where there's the kid who's standing outside of the gate begging,
Mm-hmm.
and then Joan pulls him in and she feeds him a warm meal and she gives him some fruit to eat, and
Mm-hmm.
he tastes what is sweet for quite possibly the first time in his life. And I felt when those words arrived and I was made aware of them, it was like that. And I will never forget that feeling. And I won't ever stop feeling grateful. I will try to remember to say a prayer for Hilary Mantel at least once every day, because it's hard. I think it's a challenge to be great and also to be kind. It's easy to stay great and just be great and to be assured of one's greatness, and to stay enclosed within a circle of similar backpatting greatness. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to be great and still stop to pause to consider the kid outside the gate.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's really challenging to do, which is why I will never stop feeling thankful that she took the time to read the book and that she gave it a chance. And so I personally don't take any acts of kindness for granted, no way. I take it as an unexpected grace when anyone chooses to pick up the book or to give the book a chance, because goodness knows these days, as you are more aware of probably than anyone, people are spoiled for choice. Like there's endless books to read, past, present, future.
So
There are
many.
there are better known writers and better known books, and there are a million and one reasons a person would not pick up your book. So
Yeah.
every time a person does pick up the book, it's a small miracle, I
Mm.
think, and I don't take that for granted. Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit more about your book?
I guess the less than 1 minute elevator pitch would be that it is a coming of age, possibly a kind of Bildungsroman of Joan of Arc, who likely needs no introduction.
Mm-hmm.
And it begins when she is 10 years old and explores her youth pretty extensively, I think, and it ends with her capture by the enemy, which I don't believe is any kind of spoiler,
No,
since her history is well known. Yeah.
no, no. Everybody knows about the Joan of Arc barbecue afterwards. Why Joan of Arc? What attracted you to her?
That's an interesting question. The truth is I don't think I picked her as much as the process of writing about her or choosing to write about her just sort of organically happened.
Mm-hmm.
I felt I needed her at the time I was writing about her. I needed someone with her kind of courage and endurance, because circumstances were not ideal at the
Mm-hmm.
time I embarked on the project, and things were not very optimistic at all.
Mm-hmm.
For one, I was jobless, which also for me meant that I didn't have health insurance, and I felt spiritually like I was adrift. So I needed a project, I needed a cause,
Mm,
and what occurred was I think I was actually all set to write about another individual from history, and then I happened across my bookshelf this book I had purchased years ago, and
mm,
it happened to be a biography on Joan of Arc.
mm,
And in that moment, that time, that was the only book I had on her. And I thought to myself, it wouldn't hurt to actually read this biography that I had bought and then basically ignored for years. So I did.
mm,
And I made no promises to myself at the time. I didn't pledge or make a pact with myself or anything that I would actually write about her. I only thought this might have potential. The subject matter could grow into something. And if it grows into something, it grows into something. And if it does, it doesn't.
mhm.
So.
Yeah, nice. And but you always seem to like to write about people who are a bit misunderstood, or yeah, or am I mistaken? Is it that? Like Mary B is about the what was it, the lesser known
Yeah, the
sisters?
lesser known sister. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, have you read Mary B?
no,
I might I
not
okay,
yet.
I might
I can't get it.
I'm okay, I'll send you a copy then.
Thank
Um
you.
I mean, I'm not sure if I mean in the case of Joan of Arc, I'm not sure if she's necessarily misunderstood, if only because there's a real abundance of material on her life. There already exist, like hundreds, thousands of books and
Mhm,
papers,
mhm,
by actual scholars, and I think the challenge in writing about her was for me to try to create a more human portrait and one that feels perhaps, or I should say hopefully, more secular and relatable to contemporary audiences. And that said, I do think that spirituality runs through the book. I think faith is very much present in the book. I think with Joan historically because of canonization, and obviously because she is a much loved, popular, and to this day venerated saint, it becomes relatively easy to then simplify her life,
mhm,
and it becomes easy to just look at a statue that is erected in her honor or a painting or whatever and fall in love with the statue and what that statue embodies
mhm,
versus the human life behind the statue, which is invariably going to be much more complex because
mhm,
human nature is always complex. And I also think I don't consider myself a historian, so I'm of the belief that imagination should and is always going to take reign in the novel. I mean,
mhm,
for me, it has to.
mhm,
And if anything, I think I realized after writing the first version of this novel that it wouldn't quite work as a book if I abided by a strict timeline of her history. For instance,
mhm,
if the novel were dictated by the historic timeline of a war or of a life from beginning to end, so that
mhm,
as soon as something happened historically, I would check it off like on a checklist, and
mhm.
I'd almost be compelled to write about something for the sake of writing about it or try to include everything that happened. I don't think that would
No,
work. It
no.
wouldn't make for a
Mhm,
good book, as I think you'd
mhm.
agree. I mean, I think history has a lot of great stories, but
Uh,
history doesn't always translate that smoothly into
no,
fiction.
no,
Yeah.
true, true. But that was one of the strongest points also about your book, is that you really made her come to life and made her very human, and not always likable even, but
Yeah.
understandable, and um yeah, she was a real, you made her a real person, like somebody who would live now. And that was, yeah, that I found that really gripping in the book. And also the moment where the dauphin, or what was his name, the dauphin realized that people were coming outside not for him but for her.
Right.
That was such a strong moment in the book, because you knew that things were going to change for her. And that was such a strong tipping point in the book, I found.
Yes. Yeah, I liked what you said in your original video, which was from August, I
Yeah,
believe, right? About what the saying that you have about creating a statue of wood or
yeah,
paper mache.
yeah. Because it burns easier afterwards.
Yes. Yes.
That's what we always say. Well, when somebody is getting really popular in a short amount of time, people will think, "Oh, he's the god or she is the god." If you want to make a statue of me, take one out of wood or papier mache, because otherwise it burns easier afterwards. Because you can
Right.
rise very quickly and fall down very even faster. You know, that was
Yes. Yes.
that's a bit yeah, that's what really happened to her. Yeah. What I also really liked is the right balance of research that you feel that went into the book, but you didn't overdo it. So it wasn't a dump of information, but still it was very well researched. I found there were a lot of things that I learned, and I always like that when I read historical fiction. How much time did you spend on research?
Think research all in all took about half a year,
Mm-hmm.
perhaps, for the first version of the
Mm-hmm.
novel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there is unfortunately very little that is interesting to say on the research aspect of the writing because the process it was relatively straightforward. The process itself is very boring to talk about. I think at one point I just gave myself the goal of reading about 100 pages of history a day. I had to
Mm-hmm.
set a number, otherwise I would sort of flake out.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, what I did was I created different timelines. So a
Mm-hmm.
timeline of Joan's life that was quite extensive, a timeline of the portion of the Hundred Years' War that was relevant
Mm-hmm.
to the time span of the book, and within that timeline, more smaller timelines of the supporting cast of characters. And I believe there was also a document of just facts, just interesting anecdotes that I would try to work into the narrative, but oftentimes they would be cut because my editor just found that it deviated too much from the story or that it made the story lag. And so it was good to have that perspective because sometimes I think you can get carried away with too much historic exposition. I think the challenge was figuring out how to incorporate the research into the writing that felt, as you said, as organic as possible. For instance, I think a good example of this would be trying to figure out how to use food in an interesting way, both as a plot vehicle with what ultimately happens with her sister, and also as a means for Joan to encounter her vision, so to speak, of the Archangel Michael. And I think, yeah, his image is stamped on the gift the Dauphin gives her during their first official meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the challenge with historical fiction, which is how to maintain that balancing act, as you said, of not having too much exposition and not making the book end up being like one of those it's funny, those hybrid animals, like a liger or something, where it's not completely a lion and it's not completely a tiger. It ends up being like this strange creature between a biography and a novel, which sometimes reads like nonfiction and sometimes suddenly reads like fiction. I didn't want the book to end up like that in that kind of state, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you did a really good job of finding the right balance and making everything, uh, first of all, believable, but also you really are sucked into the world and you really can see what's happening, and that's yeah, you have a very vivid way of writing, I think, and I really enjoyed the book. And for me, it's the best historical fiction of the year.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
yeah, well, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it. Otherwise, I would keep
Maybe, yeah, maybe
quiet.
this is the only historical fiction book you've read the whole year.
No,
I'm just kidding.
no, 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 no. but still, no, it's one of those books that I will recommend and re-recommend as much as possible. So, and I'm also very glad. I want to add, I'm also very glad it has been translated into Dutch, yeah,
Oh
and
yes,
into
thank you.
Portuguese and into Spanish, I believe.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and German.
No, not German, not French. No
No,
French
yeah,
and no German. I
yeah.
think Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
The Dutch version is coming out on the 15th of November. I'm looking forward to see how the Dutch speaking people will react to it. My library has already ordered their copy, so.
Oh, oh, thank you so much. Yes, I was very
Um,
grateful.
well, at least you will have sold one then.
One copy should be just fine.
But you had also very good reviews in the New York Times and Kirkus, the TLS. So you had really good reviews by very important newspapers. How did that feel?
um, it felt good. It felt like especially when the review was pretty on point. And I felt that with the Maureen Corrigan review in the Wall Street Journal. If a review feels on target and it expresses what you were trying to accomplish with the book, then you really feel seen. And it makes you feel like the effort was like might be worth it. But I also feel that too with a lot of other things. Like for instance, when I came across someone on Instagram, or a few people on Instagram who post the book and put the book beside their dog. I'm a dog person. I'm a big dog person. And I thought that was such a kind gesture to do that. It's a lovely gesture just to take that time to snap a photo of the book with your dog, or even there was a bookseller, I believe she was a bookseller in Belgium, in a bookstore in Antwerp, and she took a picture of the book that I thought was very aesthetically pleasing, and she mentioned that she had taken a trip to France, I believe, and maybe because of the book encouraged her to visit some of the sites that Joan had been to, such as like Orleans and Rouen, I believe. So I feel very those things I don't take for granted.
When you start writing, are you more of a planner, or do you go organically?
I do some small amount of outlining. I don't like to do too much because I think the scene in your head and what you visualize is probably more important than too much planning. Also, I believe excessive planning and outlining may take away, in my opinion, some of the fun from discovering where the story will take you. And what I will do when the book reaches a certain point, I did this when the book was pretty much written or almost finished, is I write down these brief 1 or 2 sentence lines about scenes I would like to add. And I do this after extensive writing sessions that last probably some handful of hours, like when I would be spacing out and watching TV but not really watching what is on the screen because the mind is still thinking about the book. And I jot down lines about ideas I have for new scenes, and it could just be a feeling that I want to add, some kind of emotion that I want to infuse into a particular passage, or more details about something, not necessarily a full scene to further the plot. Yeah.
Yeah, but so also when you have your character in mind, you've decided, okay, I'm gonna write about Joan of Arc. What is your tipping point where you say, okay, now I'm going to start writing? How do you decide that?
Yeah, for me, at least in this case, for this character, it wasn't an active decision. I think. I
Mhm.
think it may be more of um I think it may be more that you feel compelled to finally write about the character at the time that you're beginning to undertake a new project, and a lot of it just happens naturally. You start a
Mhm.
journey that you're probably really quite uncertain about in the
Mhm.
beginning,
Mhm.
and especially writing about a character that already has something of an international reputation and
Yeah.
was already a religious icon and a
Mhm.
national
Mhm.
icon.
Mhm.
You know it's going to be a challenge,
Mhm.
and there are going to be obstacles, and
There
it's
will be
going to
critique, and
yeah, right.
there will be
Yeah.
people say, "Well,
Yes.
this
Yeah.
fact isn't correct, or this or that, or she has never met this or that," or there will be always something.
Yeah, there will always be something, especially when it's a religious, icon too, and people will have problems, and it will generate some amount of not not extensive controversy, I think, but some amount of debate about how you depict
Mhm.
a character, and that's why. But I think when you're writing too, you have to put the blinders on,
Mhm.
and I'm very thick-skinned in the process of writing. I
Mhm.
don't really care too much about what is going on in
Yeah.
the outside world, but I'm a pain in the neck during the publication process. Uh, that's when I start caring much more about what people think, and I'm
Right.
trying to get better about that.
Yeah.
But also for me, I think the circumstances of writing, they can't be too comfortable for me, because you have to
Mhm.
be compelled to get up and write every day. So I think there
Mhm.
has to be some amount of drive, and maybe even a little desperation. And for
Yeah, it
me,
has to hurt a little. Huh?
yeah, it has to hurt a little,
Mhm.
for it to get done.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, it's um, like, yeah, you have a very tactile way of writing and very contemporary. And I can imagine that you have maybe, do you speak another language besides English?
Yes. Yeah, I speak Mandarin Chinese.
Yeah, at home mostly.
Yes, at
Yeah,
home mostly. Yes.
yeah. And does it color your writing style? Do you think?
I mean, that's a really good question, and also a very hard question to
Mm-hmm.
answer. And I think the best reply I can give is that perhaps it does help, but maybe in a way that I'm not completely aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard that translation is an excellent creative exercise to do,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're feeling stuck with your own writing.
Mm-hmm.
But also the other aspect of this is that I don't consider my facility with Chinese equal to that of my facility with English.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can be relatively fluent in two languages or even more, but it's like right hand, left hand.
Yeah.
Like ambidextrous, you're going to have a dominant hand, and for me, that dominant hand is still English.
Mm-hmm.
That's the language I feel comfortable doing
Mm-hmm.
my creative writing in, so far, at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a lot of admiration for the Chinese language, and it has its own rhythm and musicality, and it has a lot of depth.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I hear a phrase in Chinese, immediately, it could be just a few words. Immediately, I feel very moved.
Yeah.
Immediately, it brings up some kind of emotion, like it has struck a chord in my soul or something.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, even if it's not the language that you primarily write in, you hear something and it still is able to reach deep inside you, and it moves a part of your spirit. You feel a connection to it, and I think that's probably something that's unbreakable.
Yeah.
What about for you?
Well, for me, when I speak dialect, my dialect is what I speak at home,
Mm,
and it is. I always say it's the language of my heart.
right.
So when I can even be more precise in what I feel, in saying what I feel in my dialect than in normal, like, regular Dutch or even, and when I say something in another language like English, German, or French, it
Right.
feels more distant. So if I say something I really mean, I have to say it in my own language, in my own dialect, and then it comes really from the heart. It's like when there's when it's another language, even though you speak it perfectly, there's always a little distance between what you say and your heart, I think.
Yes. I loved your reading when in that, I think it was in the Western Canon video
Mm-hmm.
that you uploaded. What was that poetry reading that you did?
Egidius maar best te bleven.
Yes. Okay. I didn't, if there weren't subtitles at the bottom of the video, I wouldn't have understood a word, but I was all the same. The sounds and the musicality of the language were very touching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Old Dutch, and Old Dutch is very close to my dialect, so
Oh.
yeah.
Okay. Wait, how many languages are you fluent in?
Fluent, well,
Or maybe that I should say maybe that you can read or speak.
I can write in English and in French less,
Mm-hmm.
because I learned French more in a working environment, very verbal, and the same for German. So, but I feel comfortable writing in English, although I know it's not perfect. But I don't care too much about if it's right or wrong, as long as people understand you. Mostly people are very forgiving. So yeah, but I speak fluently 4 languages.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
But that's
obviously
not
very
so
impressive.
strange here in Belgium. It's not so strange.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. If we drive an hour, we're in another language. So here, 10 kilometers, like it's an hour walk. I have to walk 1 hour and everybody speaks French. If I take the car and drive 1 hour, they already start speaking German. So on the other side, it's then we cross the channel, we're in England. So it's normal. And yeah, because also I live close to Brussels. Well, everything is close to Brussels. I've told you that before. Yeah, it's a very multinational or how multicultural city. So we have the European Union, we have NATO, we have everything there. So we have to speak quite a few languages, and it's something we always do when we can be with 10 people, Dutch speaking people at the table, and one is English spoken. Well, the whole table will speak English.
Okay, that's really cool.
Let's go back. What kind of authors inspire you the most?
I really value prose at the sentence level. I think the quality of writing is important, even though that seems an obvious thing to say. And it doesn't matter if you write quickly or you write slowly. I think readers, I'd like to believe that readers will almost always be able to tell more or less the amount of thought and effort you put into something. And I'm inspired by authors who give readers space to think about their work and who don't necessarily reveal their hand at everything. I like authors who take for granted the reader's intelligence and who don't over explain, and they know the reader can draw their own assumptions, and I like authors who challenge readers, that don't make it too easy, which isn't to say that I'm diminishing at all the difficulty of writing something that reads fast, like of writing a page turner. I think that's a challenge in and of itself.
It's another genre.
To keep the reader engaged. I just like books that sometimes challenge readers' patience and that encourage them to read and reread, and upon rereading discover new elements and facets of the work that they may have missed the first time around. And I think you mentioned in a video, I forget which one, that for you it might have been it might have been the Western Canon video that emotion for you is number one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that up to a certain point, but I also say that the quality of the prose can oftentimes be tied to the emotion that is.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You can often you can be in awe of somebody writing style or
Yes,
the way they choose the words and the way they form their sentences. But
yeah,
sometimes you have writers who only emphasize on that, and I
right,
prefer the emotion that it evokes
right.
and seeing than reading stuff where you feel that the author wants to show off.
Okay, yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, the prose can veer too much into being like a muscular flex
yeah,
where, yeah, as you said, you're showing off what you can do
yeah.
versus actually evoking
Yeah, and
something.
sometimes
Yeah,
the less you say, the
right.
more it's stronger and the more it stays with you. Like now the new Nobel Prize winner
Yes.
Annie Ernaux,
Yeah.
she is very surgical in her writing, very clean and
Mhm.
very short and but it takes some time to digest and you keep on thinking about what she wrote and that's also very good if a book stays with you for a very long time.
Yes, and I think you held up a book of hers, and I was
Yeah,
surprised to see that it was a very slim volume.
yeah, yeah, they're
Wasn't
always slim.
they're always slim.
Yeah,
Okay.
mostly, yeah, they're slim. This is, yeah, this one, this is only, it's a novella, it's, oh, what is it, not even 100 pages. Yeah,
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
it's really good and it's always extremely personal. She writes. Uh, Somebody said she's the best at writing Erno, so it means herself really, and
Right.
that's amazing. Yeah, I know. Like Wolf Hall for you was a very important book for you by Hilary Mantel. Can you tell something about that?
Yeah, I don't think I'm saying anything new when I attribute the influence of the work on me to the way that she brought historical characters to life.
Mhm.
And before reading Wolf Hall, I would have never pictured a sniffling Thomas More, a red-eyed Thomas More, a crying Thomas More. I would have never pictured an Anne Boleyn whose eyes, I think she compares them to abacus beads, flicking back and forth, always calculating. And and I think most important, I wouldn't have the friends that I do now if it weren't for that book, that trilogy. And Thomas Cromwell, he's the I think of him as the friend who is always sitting just outside my line of vision. And I personally live a very, very isolated life. I don't have that many friends. And I think that's mostly by choice, maybe, or I'm just an insufferable person. I don't know. But Thomas Cromwell is always there, and Rafe is always there. And even after their heads are gone, Thomas More and Anne Boleyn are still there for me. And I feel sometimes, I feel the warmth of their company, and I see them so clearly thanks to Mantel's work. I see them better and clearer than any painting by Holbein. And I would also say, like any truly great book, Wolf Hall is a lesson in human nature. People are just people, and I think times change, but human nature doesn't really change. And people are still motivated by the same thing hundreds of years ago as they are now. Greed, power, love, it doesn't really change, not really. And I think, as soon as I read Wolf Hall, it changed my life. And it was almost as if I'd taken like a lighter to every book that came before. And I say that only half jokingly. It's like the world shifted and there occurred some kind of sea change within me. And it was a book that was written in a way that I'd never encountered before. And it surprised me with its density, but how also so easy it was to turn the page. It read so smoothly, despite how much it contained. And I'm not even sure if I'd read a book written in the present tense before Wolf Hall. I didn't even know that was possible. And the sentences are just ones you can read and reread. And I wondered often to myself, how did Mantel capture the rhythm of the sentences? How do they just flow in and out of one another? How do they never feel too long, despite the information and often the weight of the emotion that they contain? And I felt in reading the book that I was being given essentially a master class in both how to write historical fiction and fiction in general. And reading the sentences is a lesson in how to write with texture, how to write both with sound and with visuals. And I think of the sentence. I'm just gonna pull it up here. Uh, okay, there's a sentence about Anne Boleyn, and it goes, she is almost okay. She is almost there now, almost there. Her body taut like a bowstring, her skin dusted with gold, with tints of apricot and honey. When she smiles, which she does often, she shows small teeth, white and sharp. So, in that sentence alone, you have the visual, you have the sound of the words, the smoothness of flesh dusted with gold, you have the luxuriousness of that image, and you have that combined with the sweetness of smell, that is the apricot and the honey. But then the sentence, which I love, it ends with a bite, it ends with a kind of edge, with the small teeth white and sharp. So I learned how to write in a more, as you said, like a tactile way, I think, through Wolf Hall. And it was a lesson about how to make history visceral and immediate, which is really important when you're writing about characters from centuries ago.
Yeah, that's a very powerful sentence too. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there's another powerful sentence, which is my favorite sentence in the whole trilogy, and it's when I think maybe it's the moment when Cromwell decides to that he has to take vengeance on the cardinal's death.
Hmm.
And I mean, you probably remember this sentence. It's okay. Another man would go to Leicester to see where he died and talk to the abbot. Another man would have trouble imagining it, but he has no trouble. The red of a carpet's ground, the flush of the robin's breast or the chaffinch, the red of a wax seal or the heart of a rose, implanted in his landscape, seared in his inner eye, and caught in the glint of a ruby, in the color of blood. The cardinal is alive and speaking. Look at my face. I am not afraid of any man alive. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just amazing writing.
Yeah. It's sad that she'd never won the Nobel Prize because she really deserved it.
Yeah, she was just a spectacular author with a lot of range as well beyond the Wolf Hall trilogy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Too. Yeah.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's weird. Um, Besides Wolf Hall, what are a couple of your favorite books?
Uh, Probably the one that springs to mind is Remains of the Day
Mm,
by Ishiguro. I
mm-hmm,
love that book so much.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
I think he wrote an article about how quickly he wrote that book, which is amazing to me. I can't remember how many days or weeks he spent on it, but apparently he wrote it very quickly. Um, and it's interesting too. I mentioned this sometimes because I think both books, if I'm not mistaken, they won the Booker, right? So
mm-hmm,
Remains of the Day won the Booker, and Wolf Hall won the
mm-hmm,
Booker. And for me, they couldn't be more different.
mm-hmm,
One is like very condensed. The other one is like rich and sumptuous, and I think like over 600 pages.
mm-hmm.
Um, also that collection of that William Trevor stories with the orange spine. It's a do you know what I'm referring to? It's like a huge book. It's his collected stories, and I think it's published by Viking. Might be Viking, and it's over 1,000 pages.
Mm.
It might be 1,000, 1,200, nearly 1,300 pages, and the paper is like really, really thin. It's like that tissue kind of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
We call it
yo,
cigarette paper, you know.
yes, and I think so I think William Trevor used to work as a copywriter. So you and William Trevor have that in common.
Commons.
Yeah. I think he worked for a time as a copywriter, and I could be mistaken, but I think I read this in an interview he gave. I don't think he took the job that seriously, so he would spend most of the time when he was supposed to be writing copy, he would spend that time writing stories. And because he was given a lot of time to write copy, he refused to spend that time, thinking about. I think he said something about like, I refuse to spend that time like thinking of 4 lines to describe like paint. And so he would just write stories, and he started work on one of his novels. And my favorite story from that collection, my absolute favorite story from that collection, is one called "The Smoke Trees" of San Pietro. And if you haven't read it, I would recommend reading that. It's an amazing short story. I was in tears at the end.
Oh, I've never cried over a book.
Wait, who?
I have never cried over
You have never cried over a book?
laughing,
How's that
yes,
possible?
and anger, yeah, and disgust.
Oh, I always cry.
I don't. And movies, a child starts crying. I don't know.
Well, movies, I'm okay, more okay, but with books, oh, definitely. Like Remains of the Day, at the end, I was bawling.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just cry from the beauty of the writing.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, when I was reciting that sentence, my voice was already breaking. I was,
what I did have was, in the beginning of the year, I read The Street by Anne Petrie, and I was really moved by it. I was really, for me, it was a masterpiece. What a book. Have you ever read it, The Street?
No, I haven't. Wait, sorry, what's the title again?
The Streets.
The Streets. Okay.
Yeah. And the main character is the street, and there's a woman living there with her son, and she's actually way too pretty to be good for her. So she's always harassed and everything, and the street makes it even more difficult.
Right.
It's a really beautiful book. Yeah.
Okay, I will check it out.
Written in 1948 or something, 49, in the 40s, just after.
Okay. I've actually never heard of the author either, so
Anne Petrie is a black author. She's
okay.
She has 2 major works, that is The
Right.
Street and The Narrows.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for your time. I hope that you have an excellent year ahead still, and I wish you a lot of luck in the Belgian parts with your book, and in the rest of Europe, and in Brazil even, I'm told. And
yes.
well, that's fun though. No.
Yes, no. I mean, one never knows where one's book will sell in terms of foreign rights. So,
and maybe France will follow if they can't. They're a bit chauvinistic when it comes to their women and their heritage. But thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Anne, for having me on your channel. Thank you so much.